Personnel and Animal Welfare to order. Council members Zine and myself, Paul Koretz, are present. We're going to ask that item number 5 be continued and that we ask for a report back from the CAO on item number 5. And otherwise, we will begin with item number 1.
Councilman, before we move on item number 5, I think the CAO representative has a concern about the report back.
Oh, okay.
Just that we're not the right jurisdiction to comment on that. The CLA would be assisting the council if the council wanted to designate something as a memorial or observance, a ceremony. We just don't really have a role in that.
I'm not sure that's entirely correct, but we'll ask the CLA then for a report back.
Yeah, that would be more appropriate.
That's fine. All right, so we'll start with item number 1.
On item 1, the city administrative officer has submitted reports relative to unfreeze requests submitted for managed hiring committee review approval. The reports are for the months of July and August of 2012, and those reports are also referred to Budget and Finance Committee.
Good afternoon, Ben Seha with the CAO and representative of the CAO on the Managed Hiring Committee. Before you, there are 2 reports, one for the month ending July, one for the month ending August, where we have provided you with some statistics relative to the total requests submitted by departments to the Managed Hiring Committee, as well as the total number of position counts by each department. Just so that you are aware, one request may have multiple positions tied to that request. So that's why the numbers aren't exactly, when you're looking at the 2 tables on attachment 1 and 2, there's a difference in terms of the total numbers for each department. So one request, as I stated, could include 1, 2, 4, or up to hundreds of positions being requested, depending on the department. One of the things to note is that at times requests by the departments come in late, and so they are often put on hold until the following meeting, which may occur the following month. And also there are times where the Managed Hiring Committee requests additional information, whether it's because the department did not specify exactly what they wanted to do relative to offering the position as a transfer opportunity, certifying the list, or offering the position for promotion internally to their staff or to others outside the city. So at times the Managed Hiring Committee will request additional information from the department, which will be noted on here as a hold, or and like I said, at times departments will submit information late to the analyst, and so a meeting may occur, and those are noted as those requests pending CO review. So that's the designation between those different columns you see on those attachments. I'm here to answer any questions that you may have.
Yeah, I've got a couple. How long does it typically take from the date the department submits a request to the time the Managed Hiring Committee makes its decisions? What's an average timeline?
It varies tremendously. I mean, based on the request. One department may have one individual request for a position, which will be relatively easy to analyze on the part of the analyst, and fairly easy to review on the part of the committee, as opposed to other requests, which may have, like I said, 100 requests in there, including as-needed requests, including requests for expedited approval or blanket approval on some classes. So it could vary tremendously from one department to another. No one request is the same, as we are finding out.
Do you have a sense, though, what a typical timeline is?
I mean, beginning this fiscal year, we have made it an effort, and through the reporting of this, that's exactly what we're trying to do, is to be more transparent relative to when departments submit their request and how soon the Managed Hiring Committee addresses their request. So it's, what we've have told departments is if you submit by the deadline of the next upcoming meeting, Managed will consider that request. So in essence, if there's a meeting coming up next Friday, this week would be the deadline to get that request into the analyst, and then the analyst has a deadline of that following Tuesday to submit it to the Managed Hiring Committee. So if those deadlines are met, then Managed Hiring will consider those at the following meeting. And but as I stated earlier, there are times where the information submitted just isn't enough for us to make a decision, especially if they're looking to do multiple approvals. So for example, if there's a cascading effect that's going to take place where they want to promote one position and then that creates a vacancy in the lower position, and then they want to get approval for that position even though it's not vacant yet because they're already, departments are already assuming that position will be vacant based on the prior promotion. So, some of those require a little bit further analysis and information from the department as to what exactly their intent is with their hiring request.
So there's a lot of moving parts.
There are a lot of moving parts. I'll be the first to say that, in the past, the committee was somewhat slow in terms of responding back to the departments, but this is, we're trying to turn a new leaf here and get back to the departments whether we're holding it for information, or sometimes we've just send it back denying the request for reasons that we feel are based on, the request does not necessarily comply with personnel practices.
Well, I'm glad to hear it sounds like a better and more expeditious process.
And Councilmember Karen Kalfayan with the CLA's office, I'll also add to that during the budget discussions, there was also an instruction from the council to look at some of the special funded departments, public safety and so on, because some of the departments have been requesting more of a hiring plan, and Managed Hiring has been looking at those as instructed and proceeding accordingly.
Okay, and just a couple clarification questions. I noticed in the July report, there's a column called Return to Department, and in the August report, there's a column Return to Department Denied. Are these actually different, or did they just change the terminology?
It's actually they are different in that the return to the department may just mean that the Managed Hiring Committee probably wants to see more explanation or information. So we're not putting it on hold. We're just returning it to you, and if the department so chooses to resubmit, provided that they add in that information that we felt was needed, they can do so. The deny means that based on Managed Hiring Committee's review, there just isn't any logic there to approve it. For example, a department may be asking for an unfreeze for an unfunded position, in which case there's no funding there to provide that, to have that position filled. So why give the department any hope that could possibly be filled throughout the year if it's unfunded? So we want it to be more transparent and not let any departments have that false hope that if they keep submitting, that somehow, some way, things are going to get better anytime soon.
Okay, and one other question. In July, 11% of the approved requests were general funded, and 87% were special funded. In August, 65% were general funded, and only 25% were special funded. Is there a reason in the differential in approval percentages?
I think it's mostly due to, again, the makeup of the request being reviewed during that month. So in July, we had a huge request from the Bureau of Sanitation that really skewed the numbers towards special funds. In August, we had a huge request from the police department for sworn personnel that skewed the results towards general fund. So again, it depends on the makeup of the submissions and the funding source.
So just random nature of the submissions rather than any kind of policy changes that were made?
Yeah, there was no policy changes to indicate this. I mean, it's really based on when which departments are submitting at any given time and what's their funding source that will determine the makeup.
Thank you. Mr. Zine, any questions on item number 1?
Yes, the building and safety, 31 out of 31, public works, 202 out of 245, and then the police department in August, 280 out of 288. The question is, do we look at the specific categories? What says police department, that's a huge department that has nearly 10,000 people, and it goes from the chief down to the policeman on the street. Does that include civilians? I'd like to see a breakdown. Are these hired police officers? Are these promotions? When you just have a 280 out of 288, it doesn't tell us, other than the police department's getting a whole lot of bodies.
Oh,
Where are they going? What are they for?
Well, we do have the individual breakdown of the approvals and the positions that were approved for each department. I mean, that's
We'd
just...
like to see those, because if we're going to say, have these already been granted? Are they already in place, or is it pending to go to council for approval?
I mean, the reason why, I mean, we indicated that we could provide that upon request. The reason why we didn't include it as part of the report, and we really didn't plan to include it as part of the monthly reports, is if you see the totals underneath, that's over almost 3,000 positions that, you know, you would be getting reams and reams of paper relative to each department and each position for each department. So it was it's one of those things where we indicated that we could provide it if you so requested, and we will,
I'm just
if you're requesting.
See what they're filling. Are they filling promotions? Are they
For
filling
police,
vacancies?
is really tied to their hiring plan. It's I could tell you that it's promotions. So it's whether it's lieutenants being promoted to captains, or sergeants to lieutenants, or what have you.
Well, one of the problems is very candid. I met with the lieutenant last night. He was in the field. There was a sergeant in the station, and that was it, other than 2 radio cars. And I said, where's everybody? Well, we don't have anybody. So you have a lieutenant handling calls in the field. You got a sergeant watch commander, and that's it. I said, how are you deploying any personnel to handle any kind of calls, or if you need a backup? That kind of deployment is very distressing, and when I look at these numbers, I'd like to know where the bodies are going, because this particular patrol division, which I don't want to lay out this lieutenant, who I sat and had dinner with and got this information, I said, this is really absurd.
These numbers are just approvals to unfreeze. They're still the actual, if it's a promotion
Well, when's it
procedures.
This is July and August. Have these taken effect, or are they still going through the process?
We don't keep track of that. We just, this committee is...
Does council approve, or, I mean, you bring it to this committee, is this information only, or is this actually something we're going to vote on?
This is information only. This was a report that was requested by the council during the budget process. It asked for monthly reports on managed hiring. As far as the details, I mean, those details can be provided to you for information. This report itself I believe would go to council. But just in response to the question you had specifically, once managed hiring approves something, it goes to the department. The department is then the one who determines the timing on whether they hire it right away or wait, and deployment for the police department would be the department's responsibility. The managed hiring doesn't have anything to do with deployment. We look at their in the case of police, a quarterly deployment, and approved based on their deployment plan.
So this is basically information only for us.
Yes.
And what about funding? Do they look at funding, how they're going to pay for these positions?
The analysts, CEO analysts, when they receive the request from the departments, it's part of their analysis. What's the funding source? What's the funding amount for each department? And, they even consider things like, can this work be absorbed? Do we need to actually unfreeze a position, or can this work be absorbed? That's all part of their analysis. As far as also what's the current vacancy rate for that particular position, classification within that department. I mean, it's a pretty thorough analysis of what takes place even before managed hiring starts considering these requests.
So when you look at the police department, this could be everything from the clerks, the civilian personnel, up to the assistant deputy chiefs.
Exactly. I mean, and other things are considered as well. I mean, like I said, what's their budget situation now? For the police department, obviously, with the potential of layoffs that may be occurring in certain classes, we would think twice about approving classes in the, unfreezes in the same classes when you're talking about laying off in that class. So So the adopted budget is definitely taken into consideration and their funding levels before the analysis is even presented to Managed Hiring Committee.
So you have adopted budget, what about the real budget?
Well, the
Department's over budget, as I understand.
Well, the actual information as departments report on their actuals through the financial status reports to the CAO, and as they report on their actuals or indicate in their requests what their funding level is or what the projected salary amounts are for the year, we will look at that information. The CAO's office and their analysts will look at that information and make a determination whether or not they recommend approval on these positions or recommend that additional information be gathered before action is taken.
Well, I just think, for my purpose, on this committee and also on public safety, to see the actual positions, are these positions in the field, are these positions of administration? I know we're short of civilians, but just the raw numbers don't tell me a whole lot. Coming from the police department, I know how things seem to disappear when it comes to personnel. So if I had to see what...
So are you requesting for all 3,000 or so positions, or would you like
Just the
just
police
the police department? Okay.
And if we can do that on the side. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And for the record, we've been joined by Mr. Alarcon, and I don't know if Mr. Alarcon has any questions or not, but now's the time.
Yeah,
Sidebar. Famous sidebar.
I was just wondering what for example, on the second page where it says police 1 out of 281, it says approved positions 1 out of 281. What does that mean?
That means that in the month of July, the Managed Hiring Committee approved that 1 out of 281 positions be unfrozen. And the reason, but then you have to look at the following month, where 280 positions out of 288 were approved. So
And under where it says pending CAO review, what's the,
basically that means that, so if you're looking at the police department in the month of July, what this tells us is that the police submitted to the CAO for review a request for 200 or multiple requests for 281 positions. Perhaps because of the timing of when that was submitted or the back and forth in terms of gathering information, Managed Hiring Committee in the month of July only had enough information to make approval on one of those positions. And 280
It's not
positions.
listed under the pending CAO review, the other
It's- but-
280.
It's listed on the unhold. I mean, that's another, the CAO may move that forward to the Managed Hiring Committee, but the Managed Hiring Committee still may request additional information that may not be in the document that's submitted by the CAO. So that was most likely the case. We approved that one because we felt that we had enough information on that one, but at that time, we probably didn't have enough information from the 280. But then when you look at the following month, you see that those 280 that were previously held were approved, meaning that between that time and the following meeting, Managed Hiring received the information it had requested and made those approvals.
okay, I don't have any questions.
Okay.
I have one more question.
Sure,
I've
go
been
ahead.
managed hiring for a long, long time. Who actually sits on managed hiring?
It's the representative of the CLA, the CAO, and the mayor's office.
That's it.
That's it.
So they make the decision.
They make the decisions based on recommendations from the CAO analyst for that department.
Well, we're responsible for this budget.
Yes.
The budget, I understand, is a deficit, a huge deficit, and I see positions being moved along when we're facing a lot of financial difficulties. So I look at these numbers, which are staggering numbers as far as personnel, and you're talking 3,000 positions. How are we going to pay for all this?
Well, I mean, and that's exactly what the managed hiring role is. It's in essence a way to make sure that hiring doesn't exceed what we're actually budgeted for. But because there are projects that are special funded and there is a need to continue down that path, we do look at those special funding departments and make plenty of exemptions. For example, the city clerk has currently a blanket authority for elections division because of the very nature of their work during this time. There is an exemption for street lighting because it is special funded, as well as you saw those numerous requests for sanitation. That's also because of a special funding. And we've recently have also approved requests for housing, for building and safety, because again, those have special funds and work that needs to be done to fulfill those requirements of those special funds. So that is really driving a lot of the requests. But we still have general fund departments that have a need for positions because of vacancies that occur during the year. Perhaps they were filled at the beginning of the year, but somebody gets a job offer from DWP and they go that way, or from the airport or LAWA or the harbor, and they go that way. And so that leaves vacancies in departments that need to be filled for critical work.
And
I
I think-
understand the special fund, but it looks at 11% of our general fund, 87% special funded, 1% grant, and 1% general and special funded. So that 11% is what I'm concerned about. The other special fund, grant fund, there's obviously funds to cover that. But when we come to the general fund, which has a big gap, it's 11% of this request, 31 positions.
Are any of these positions both general funded and special fund?
Some do have
You can't
blended
split-
fund.
Can't split the baby in half.
Yeah, some do have blended funding, but like I said, what drives these percentages, these are just kind of a snapshot of that month. So those numbers you're looking at are a snapshot for the month of what was approved in July. And again, that one was driven by, and that month was driven by sanitation, which skewed the numbers greatly towards the special fund. But the 11% was perhaps skewed by the fact that in that month we had 18, or rather, we had some general services department, fire department, finance, and other departments that are considered general fund also get approvals. So
And I think what managed hiring tries to do is to look at the funding, and if there's funding for it, then, and there's a need for it, I think one of the things that managed hiring tries to evaluate is whether a department could do the work without general fund. If you look at this overall, most of them, the lion's share are either special funded or public safety.
Why don't we just exempt special funded?
Well, what we've been trying to do with these, based on what the council had requested, is for the special funded departments, is look at a hiring plan for the year, which is why you see sanitation with a huge request. We're probably not going to be seeing.
But why don't we
a lot
just
more.
exempt them? Why go through this?
well, some departments have special funds that are also not necessarily completely out of the
Trash-
woods.
Sanitation workers?
Well, no, and those have been exempted.
Okay.
Sanitation
So
has.
these 280 are not trash collectors?
No, you're looking, the 280 was police, so no, they're not
Okay, what
trash
was-
collectors.
Sanitation was-
2,000 that were sanitation.
Yeah, sanitation
Okay.
had 2,000, yes.
2,000 are not trash collectors?
No, they are. I believe several of them are. What I'm saying is that for departments like housing, for example, we have exempted to a great degree.
No, but I was talking about all special funded positions,
Well-
like sanitation. Why not just exempt them from this process?
Well, because some departments have a multiple special funds, so it's not just one special fund, and some of those
But if
special
they're
funds,
special fund, what difference does it make?
while some of them are being subsidized by the general fund.
Right. Some of them are not 100% special funded. Some of them have a combination of special funds and general funds.
Mhm.
There may be special funds that are not entirely
So, but-
solvent, if you want to use that word.
If they're 100% specially funded, why don't we just exempt them?
Well, generally, those are approved. There weren't really any exceptions made at the very beginning.
So
of the
then
year.
why don't we exempt them? That's my point.
Well, because we have to look at the funding source for the request. I mean,
Why?
departments have.
Trust them?
Well, we trust, but we verify.
I think I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I think it's more you trust, but you delay the hiring
But I think
process.
that's why you'll see a large request, for example.
So if you have more requests, you can delay longer, because
No.
then you have an
If-
excuse
if
to
it's special
process
funded,
more.
to be honest,
more
then
bodies
those
and
probably get get taken care of more quickly. I think there's more of an evaluation when it's a general fund, and we know there are general fund issues, but if there's a special fund and there's funding available, those would be approved. So 2,000, that's probably going to be their request for the year, primarily.
All right.
Well, I think we're on the same wavelength that we're wondering whether special funded positions should just be exempted from this whole process. So I'm going to suggest that we note and file the CAO report, but that we make this point, take it back to the CAO and look at whether that might be something that we consider, and bring back a short report to the council in 30 days, to this committee in 30 days on that subject.
On the subject.
On the subject of the possibility of eliminating specially funded requests for managed hiring.
Strictly special funded, not combo.
Yes, exactly.
100%.
100% special funded.
And when the special fund runs out, what happens to the position?
Well, that's part of the reason for the review, is that we want to make sure that there's not created a problem within a special fund if they're totally exempted. So, because, special funds have limitations as well.
So you could have a special fund for 1 or 2 years, and then it falls off, and you got that position, and what do you do with that body?
That's part of the
That's the
consideration.
problem.
That's part of the consideration.
That's why we're.
Of course, one would also think that's part of what general managers are supposed to do. Before we had managed hiring, we obviously were able to deal with that without such a problem. So I would just ask that, as I suggested, the CAO comes back with a report on whether there's any feasible way to do that. So without objection, that will be noted and filed with that request. Thank you. And
We have a distinguished council member.
we will return to item number 5 and hear from our distinguished colleague, Mr. Labange.
Is this an item that we continued?
This is the item we continued, so we will
Yeah, just to get some clarification.
we will
Please, I guess
revive
I-
it without objection.
Mr. Chair, when you go to the airport and they have this fast pass now for TSA, maybe for this exempt hiring, what do you call it there, Dennis? You just spoke about it.
Managed
Special
hiring.
fund managed hiring.
Yeah.
If they're exempt, maybe there's a fast pass that could help, because I know departments have complained that they're not able to do their job. Some street services work and others get hung up, but that's just a look at that, maybe. Look at don't call it a fast pass, just call it a approved pass. Approved pass. Anyway, here's item number 5.
You're not on subject, Mr. LeBlanc.
That's okay, I'm never on subject, I'm always here. Thank you very much. You got something in your glasses,
Thank you,
Eddie.
Mr.
Okay. Good morning and good afternoon. I just, on item number 5, here's the situation. We have holidays throughout the year, and throughout the year, some of the holidays always need an extra boost. Memorial Day, sometimes you see advertising on the television about a mattress sale or a Big Ed's TV sale or something. And several years ago, I thought it would be appropriate that we could recognize our city employees who've fallen in the line of service. Rory Shaw, Bureau of Engineering, at a open caved-in roadway up in the Sunlit O'Hara several years ago. There's also another engineer whose plaque is on the First Street Bridge. From the Engineering Department, the Department of Transportation, traffic officer was hit a few years ago and gave his life. We know the police officers, the firefighters, everybody. But what I have done, and also Water and Power lost the most in the building of the aqueduct in the history of the city, most people who lost their lives. So what I thought would be appropriate, because we all know our time runs, and when we do things in our office, sometimes the next people don't see the value. I think there is a value that we stop, just like this morning, which is the Purple Heart, was so important, so impressive, all spoke of it, is that we asked the CLA to look at this, and then just that the Public Works Department be responsible for coordinating, also inviting all other departments to stand on the forecourt of City Hall on the Wednesday prior to the Monday holiday and reflect and remember those who paid their lives in serving to the city in municipal work. That's the pure and simple of it. And those also, it's good for families, and it's good for the brotherhood and sisterhood of city employees to all stand together in this.
Thank you. And we have already heard this and asked that the CLA's office come back with a report on how this might be implemented.
You know, they could come back in 90 days so we could plan for 2013.
Could I ask,
Please.
I don't have a problem, I think this is a great idea. I'm just wondering if we should do it next to Memorial Day.
Well, it's not next to, well, because the reason I thought about
I just don't want to diminish,
it won't. I
the
don't believe
focus
it
on
hasn't.
that
We've
day.
done it for several years. I'm just trying to institutionalize it because my time is running. And so it's kind of worked.
my time's running faster.
I know. So on a Thursday, we did it, but now
Me
this
too,
is a
Rick.
Wednesday. On a Wednesday prior to the weekend, and just recognize it. It's not, I don't think it would take away. And also, maybe we could check with the Los Angeles County Veterans Affairs, just so they know we're not
Yeah.
trying to offend anybody. We'll just check with them, but I think it would be good. And who knows if we do this around the country
Yeah, whenever you
at
do
some
it,
point.
whenever you do it, I think it would be great. I wouldn't want to diminish the focus on Memorial Day.
Yeah, but I don't know if, I don't think it does, but let's ask the Armed Forces Commission of the county, which oversees some of this,
Yeah.
the Veterans Affairs, and that's a good suggestion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, and thank you for the suggestion.
I just wanted to come by and say hello and say how important it is. See you, thanks.
Thank you, Mr.
Appreciate it.
LeBon.
Thank you. Back to item number 2.
For item 2, the Department of Animal Services has submitted an update report on the operation of the Best Friends Animal Society at the Northeast Valley Animal Shelter.
Hi, Brenda Barnett, General Manager, Los Angeles Animal Services. I wanted to just really update you on what we're doing. So we took the opportunity to do a report on the work that's happened since Best Friends started their contract with the Northeast Valley Shelter. And we did provide some background that leading up to the economic reason for the decision. And I think significant to look at is the fact that our employee levels had dropped from 357 in 2008 and 9 to 318 this year, which is an 11% drop. So we just didn't have the bodies to actually safely do the work, and we continue to struggle with that, actually, with the largest shelter ever about to open down in South LA. So, but the good news is that during this period of time that Best Friends has taken 1,861 animals from our different shelter facilities. 34% came from North Central, 32% from East Valley, 17% from South LA, 11% from West Valley, 5% from Harbor, and 1% from West LA, to total the 1,861. They also had not planned to do any intake at that facility. However, they talked to us because people in the neighborhood were coming up to the door and knocking on the door, and we adjusted that a little bit. So they did 153 intakes, and what they actually did was they took them and held them, and they either delivered them to the East Valley Shelter to us, or else we went and picked them up, so that the people in that community didn't have to drive to the shelter themselves. They have done 1,769 spay-neuter procedures, plus 382 other veterinary services, primarily to the District 7 residents. They actually consider their spay-neuter numbers low, and they have the same challenges that we have with having enough RVTs to be able to do all the surgery that they'd like to be able to do, but they continue to try to grow that. They have started a help desk so that they answer calls for people who need assistance, and they've had out of 198 cases of people calling to ask for help, 82 were Mission Hills residents, 59 Pacoima, and 59 Sylmar, and 89 of those were confirmed to have positive outcomes, resulting in the person getting the help they needed so that the animal did not end up in the public shelter. They also provided care and quarantine for 150 dogs that we transferred to other shelter partners during this time. Then they kicked off the No Kill LA, NKLA initiative, and that's a coalition of animal welfare organizations. I don't think it's grown. I didn't know if it was during the time of this report, but that's grown to 50 of our new Hope partners have joined that, and what that means is that they're getting a $150 stipend for every adoption that they do over their baseline for the previous year. That's not for animals pulled, that's for additional adoptions. So that's giving some extra income to the 501c3 New Hope partners. They're also providing grants to coalition partners and that's what I just said. They also gave $191,150 in adoption subsidies, so that's what the total is, to the New Hope partners, and that included $32,300 to the department's Animal Welfare Trust Fund, and the rest went to the other agencies. They also gave $428,000 in spay-neuter grants for City of LA animals, and that was to accomplish 5,875 spay-neuter surgeries. And they're targeting for the full year 502,000 for over 7,000 surgeries. So they're really trying to target more surgeries into the community. In addition to the public-private partnership that we have with them, the Utah headquarters has also funded $350,000 into the Pacoima Free Fix program to spay and neuter 3,500 cats, and they have given $275,000 to Fix Nation to spay and neuter, to their spay and neuter clinic in Sun Valley. So really have tried to increase the spay neuters, and we are seeing an impact from that. I think between the fact that the city has a mandatory spay neuter ordinance and the fact that there's been a lot of money put into spay neuter, we are starting to see the benefits now with a decreased number of animals coming into the shelter. Their operating budget is over $2 million. It's almost $2.3 million. It costs us about $200,000 to allow them to operate that shelter. If we were operating the shelter, it would cost us $3.3 million, so we're estimating savings to the city of about $3.1 million. So all in all, the news is good. Fewer dogs and cats were put to death, more in happy homes, and fewer entered the shelter. And I want to take credit for our own staff for this, but we had 2,599 more dog and horse licenses sold during the same period. And we believe this ended out a sort of the last fiscal year where we could see our numbers slightly starting to turn. But what we're really excited about is the fact that in the first 3 months of this fiscal year, the incoming into our shelters are down by 615. The live releases of dogs and cats is up by 379, and our overall live save rate for cats is up 3.99%. For dogs, it's up 3.39%, and overall dogs and cats, it's up 3.95%. So we really think we're starting to see a trend, and we're very hopeful.
Okay, now, I don't know if this is correct or not, but I was under the impression that Best Friends were going to fully subsidize all the costs, so how is the city responsible for $200,000? Although obviously if it would have cost us $3.3 million and they're picking up 3.1, that's a huge percentage, but I thought they were actually going to do all of it.
I'd have to go back and look at the contract, but I think that's the utilities. I think we didn't have a way to figure out how to break out. Oh yeah, you're here.
Good afternoon. John Chavez with Animal Services. We did provide Best Friends with a $200,000 budget so that they would be doing, or the city would be taking care of any maintenance and improvements on the facilities itself. So we do have some money set aside for them to do that.
So the cost is just the facilities, all the actual active programming is fully paid for by...
That's true.
That's correct.
Yes.
And obviously, a lot of things are moving in the right direction. Fewer animals euthanized, more cats and dogs adopted, more licenses, more spays and neuters. How much of those positive outcomes are directly attributable to the Northeast Valley Shelter being run by Best Friends, and how much of that is other trends that weren't affected by it?
Well, I think the fact that if I had to, and this is sort of an opinion question, but I think if I had to say what's the major impact, it's when you combine the mandatory spay-neuter ordinance in Los Angeles and all the money that Best Friends has put into spay-neuter, I think we're starting to drive down the incoming. And I think just the fact that they are giving the stipends to the New Hope partners to help them financially, they can do more and they can pull more. And I think that what I like about that is that they get the stipend when they produce an adoption, not when they pull animals, because otherwise we could be creating sort of a hoarding situation, but they have to actually produce the adoption paperwork to get their stipend.
That's actually a good approach. How much of all this is impacted by the fact that we're able to keep that shelter open this way? What would the impact have been if we had to close it and hadn't partnered with Best Friends?
Well, what we've estimated for a number of years, at least the 2 years that I've been here for the budget cycle, is that when you close a smaller shelter, you're talking about 2,500 deaths, and when you close a larger shelter, about 4,000.
And where does this one fall in the size?
I would have to, just because they're not operating at full capacity, I would have to call it a smaller shelter. I mean, they are actually running more animals in that shelter than they had anticipated. They have increased their staffing a couple of times to be able to accommodate more animals and give them the care they need. So they're keeping more than they had anticipated, but I would still call them at the small shelter level.
Okay. Other questions, Mr. Alarcon?
Yeah, how does the stipend work?
When the New Hope partners take an animal out of one of the LA City shelters and place it, if that's an adoption that's above the adoption threshold that they had hit this month, the previous year, Best Friends gives them $150.
Where does Best Friends get the money?
Donations, I guess, it's from their own donated income.
And what does it cost to adopt an animal?
From us, it costs $102, or if you live in the city, $122, because you get a city license. Best Friends charges the same adoption fees we do. That's part of their contract. So they're heavily subsidizing all this.
They charge, so somebody adopts an animal and they charge them how much?
They charge the same that we do, $102 for a regular adoption, $122 if it's a dog if the person lives in the city, because they also sell the license and give the license revenue to us. That's under part of that omnibus, they get to keep $2.
Now, I got a notice at my house that they were adopting animals for $20.12.
Oh, well, they do run specials from time to time, just like we do, but their normal adoption rate is the same as ours. But we all run, we had that $9, 9 months, $9, 9 lives for cats, and we recently had Best Buddies for seniors. I mean, they do specials, but their general adoption fee is the same as ours.
What services do other shelters provide that are not provided at this shelter?
Well, I think that the primary thing would be the incoming, and of course they have started doing some of the incoming for people who want to drop off strays or whatever. The other shelters have animal control officers stationed at the shelter, but they actually, most of their work is not in the shelter, it's dispatched from the shelter.
So were the costs that you described, are those on-site, I'm sorry, what did you call them?
I'm confused too.
The officers?
The animal control officers?
Are they part of that budget?
Of the Best Friends budget? No.
No, of the budget, when you described the savings.
Oh, the 3.1 million, the 3.3 million that
In a
it costs
regular
us to operate a shelter?
where they have animal control officers,
Yes,
that is part of that budget.
that's correct. That's part of our budget. So what we do is we dispatch officers from the West Valley shelter and from the East Valley shelter when there are calls that are in that area, up in that district.
Boy, with the gas prices going up, that's very expensive. So I don't think it's a fair assessment to say that you're saving 3.1 million when they're not operating a full shelter. Because we're losing services. So isn't there a better way to do an assessment? I mean, if you could just extrapolate the services that they provide that are common to other shelters, then that would be a fair assessment. But when the other shelters are doing far more than adopting animals, I don't think that's a fair assessment.
I can see where you have a point. The officers don't do their work very much in the shelter. They're usually dispatched, but I can see your point.
Well, then segregate those costs from the other shelters, and then we'd have a much better assessment of how well they're doing. But to say that they're saving 3.1 million, I think is
Well, we have
Not very
60 animal control officers for the entire city.
Mhm.
So there is an impact, but it's not a huge impact.
Well, I guess my point is, this is not a good analysis. And in order to make a fair comparison, I think you'd have to drill much deeper and do a comparison of like services to like services, like costs to like costs. In this case, you're taking a holistic environment of other shelters, and then you're comparing it to a shelter that provides less service, and then you're saying you're saving 3.1 million. That's not a very good analysis. So, Mr. Chair, I'm wondering how we could get a better analysis.
I'm not sure. Do you have a suggestion?
I recommend we ask the CAO to do the assessment. I don't think this is a good way to compare apples to apples.
I don't know, what do you see as missing?
Well, for what she just pointed out, that included in the cost for the other shelters is the animal control officers. There are no animal control officers in Mission Hills. So how can you say that you saved 3.1 million? You're not comparing apples to apples.
Do you have a way to extrapolate that without the animal control officers?
There would be 4 to 6 officers assigned per shelter 24 hours a day. And depending on which shelter it is, and it varies shelter to shelter, and a lot of that depends on the number of calls that are gotten in that area. So, for example, now we've shifted more animal control officers to the West LA area because it's harder for the officers to get to calls because of the heavy traffic. So we have fewer officers in West Valley and East Valley, so we could, figure the cost of 3 or 4 animal control officers. Basically, they don't do their work at the shelter except for dispatching or filling out reports. So the work they do is out in the field. So we can also take an account of the calls that our officers respond to per zip code and tell you how many calls are made in that particular district.
But that's not my point. My point is you included those costs in the other shelters to derive a $3.1 million savings. And I'm saying you can't do that. If you segregate the cost for the animal control officers, you're going to have some number far less than 3.1 million.
Right, when the whole Best Friends concept...
In fact, I don't even like calling it a shelter. It's not a shelter, it's an adoption center.
The CAO's office did quite a bit of work in looking at the various options that we can do out in the Northeast Valley. If you let us go back to the office and take a look at some of that information, we'll double-check the figures. And, we can definitely do a cost breakdown of animal control officers at an average or a small shelter and come back with additional information before this goes to council.
Yeah, I think that would make more sense.
But are there other services that the shelters are providing that are not being provided at this shelter?
No, there are actually probably more services being provided to the community in terms of counseling, training, dog training, that kind of thing. So I think it's just the animal control officers.
I just don't like the saying that we're saving 3.1 million because you're comparing apples to oranges. The function at this shelter, and again, I hesitate to call it a shelter. It's an adoption center. But to compare that to a full-blown shelter is just a completely invalid comparison.
Well, I think it's pretty easy to do what you're asking. Though.
Yeah,
I think
I'm
we
not-
just
I'm
ask
not-
them to come back with an apples-to-apples comparison, and then a notation of what services are not provided at that shelter that are provided at other shelters, and what services are provided that aren't provided at other shelters, so that we can compare apples to apples and then look at the other factors.
I would also like to have somebody do an analysis of the mileage reports and whether our animal control officers are driving far greater mileage from the other shelters, and with the gas approaching $5 a gallon, that's costing us a lot of money.
We
I
will
think
look-
it'd be better if we operate them out of that shelter.
Okay, we can have that information before this goes to council.
And that is an option to operate, to put some officers up there. We chose not to. We
I
could do
understand that,
that.
and that's
Might be
my
something we
biggest
could look
complaint
at.
about, that's my biggest complaint about the shelter. I have no problem with the program. I have a problem with the other services that aren't being rendered there. It's simply not a shelter, and it was promised to be a shelter.
It strikes me that it wouldn't be that difficult to move some animal control officers around, because it doesn't seem like that's a major factor.
And there's
one
plenty
way
of
or the
space
other.
there. It's not like,
Yeah.
it is a large shelter in terms of size, but it's not being fully utilized, so it should be easy enough to move some
Definitely
officers there.
something to look at. So if you could report back when you report back with the statistics as well. Mr. Zine, do you have some questions?
I only have one question. It looks like 2014 taken in between the Best Friends taken approximately 1861, and then 153 animals taken in by the shelter. That's 1769 spay-neuter procedures. Isn't it the policy that every animal that leaves needs to have either spay or neuter?
Right, and some of them that are turned in are already spayed or neutered.
Okay, so that's the difference in that.
Right,
Yeah.
it's a state law. Not only do we have a mandatory spay neuter here, but a nonprofit can't release an animal that's not spayed or neutered in the state.
So this number would then reflect some of them that came in were already,
Correct.
okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
We also have one speaker from the public, Phyllis Dougherty.
Good afternoon, Phyllis Dougherty with the Animal Issues Movement. A couple of other things that you might want to use for comparison to see what's actually happening is to do a survey of the surrounding shelters, because I think you're going to find that they're all dropping about this percentage now because the major economic crisis is over. People have gotten rid of animals already that couldn't afford them, thank goodness. And so this is a change that's happening all over, so we need to compare that also. Also, how much revenue are we actually getting from dog licenses? That'll tell you how many dogs are being placed in our community, because thousands of them, from what I understand, or hundreds, are being transported out of the area. So that's not really helping us. It's just making them somebody else's problem. The New Hope Partners, from what I've heard from a lot of them, that these are the New Hope Partners because they didn't have a large base. Our large adopters that were already adopting out a large number of animals cannot necessarily adopt out more than they did last year. So they're not benefiting in the way that we're sort of a startup business, in other words, for new rescues, and of course we have no monitoring of rescues. There's another thing so we're not getting any revenue from we're getting revenue from the licensing. We're not getting any revenue from the adoptions. You need to be very clear on that. They're keeping the money, from what I understand, and there's also a proposal now to charge the regular adoption partners $30 a piece to take animals out of our shelter, plus they will spay and neuter them themselves, and yet, if this is not correct, Ms. Barnett can tell you, Best Friends is not going to be charged that $30, and yet they get to keep all of their revenue. So there are a lot of things that I think that you ought to look at that may impact how much savings there is and what's actually happening, how many of these animals are actually impacting our community, and how many of them are just being shipped out somewhere. One other thing, just if you're going to have animal control officers up there, remember you have to have animal care technicians, and you have to have that a running shelter. You can't just bring them in and put them in and let them stay by themselves.
Thank you. If there's no objection, we will hold this item in committee and ask that animal control come back with the information that was requested at our next PAW committee meeting. So without objection. Item number 3, and thank you for the information.
For item 3, the city attorney has submitted a report and an ordinance. This has to do with an amendment of the municipal code related to the equine license fee, which will create a multi-year licensing option and discounts.
We have staff here for a report on this item.
I in fact may be the staff who will be giving the report on the item. Dov LaSalle, Assistant City Attorney. I drafted the ordinance that's before you, following the guidelines of the motion made by, adopted rather, by the City Council.
Okay. A couple questions. In the fee notice section of your report, it notes that this ordinance would impose a new fee. If we're just creating multi-year licenses, how is that a new fee?
We discussed that with the office, and it was felt that this may in fact be a new fee structure, and so out of an abundance of caution, it was felt that it would be considered a new fee and would simply have to be published as such.
What's the justification for that thinking? It doesn't look like a new fee to me.
We had a very robust discussion on that issue.
I wouldn't consider that adequate justification for it. I think we'll need...
I understand. I perfectly understand. I can bring this back to the office with the question and then report back to this committee.
There's a section that calls this a new fee, even though it appears that we're just creating multi-year licenses. Doesn't look like a new fee to me. The comment was that there was a lot of debate in the city attorney's office, so I think we would need the justification for that before I'd be comfortable moving forward, because it doesn't look like a fee to me, and I don't know why we'd want to call it that. The only other, if anything, that's what it is. I don't see how it's a new fee. My other question is, we provide multi-year discounts. Why would we have a discount for a one-year license when that's just the base fee?
That was copied from the motion that was adopted by the City Council. I have a copy of that with me.
Because in essence, the 1 year is just the fee.
And this was from Arts Parks Health and Aging Committee, file 12-0307-S3. The recommendations for council action was to number 2, request the city attorney to prepare and present an ordinance to amend the LAMC section 5315.1 to create a multi-year licensing option and discount with a 10% discount for 1 year, 20% discount for 2 years, and so on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the thinking was for a 1 year discount, because that's the base. So wouldn't we just be changing the
once
base
again,
year?
that was a question that I had. However, since that was the action by the City Council, I deferred to this committee and the council to make a change to that.
What change was
The question is, we have multi-year discounts, but we have a discount on the first year, and the first year, in essence, is just the base year. So why do we have a 10% discount on the first year?
I support it.
Not that I object horribly, but
I think the idea is to encourage people to license their animals, and anything that's going to increase that. Now, I know that Parma is considering increasing the fee, so it may be a wash, but I mean, I don't mind if you start in the second year. The point is they get the discount if they get multiple years. If they only get 1 year, they can't get a discount. So I don't know how you can discount the first year either.
Well, I had the same question, but again, the council report not only had that in there in one place, but in the summary, it reiterated the same.
And that's
So
probably
I
my fault.
assume that the city council
No,
was
that's
giving
probably,
me
that's probably
clear
my fault.
directions.
That's probably my fault.
Okay.
I probably wrote it that way. But I don't think it makes sense. Probably the
And
first time I've ever written something that doesn't make sense.
I understand.
Councilmember.
And since I have to come back to committee on the question of the fees, if the committee gives me different instructions as to the discount, whether it wants to delete the discount for the first year, have a 2-year license at 10%, or keep that at 20%, whatever directions the committee wants to give, I can then, when I return, also revise the discount percentages.
Any thoughts on whether we started at 10% or 20% for the second year?
I think,
That would be less generous.
actually, I wanted to get to 50%. That's in the 5th year. So if they get a 5-year permit, and we have to understand that that means that they're not going to return to the city 4 times at the counter, and which would save money for the city. So I wanted to get to a 5-year discount, a 50% discount by the 5th year. So that's why we started in year 1.
Right. I
50.
But we
Well,
could just take out year 1 and start at 20%.
And then
year
if you
2.
if you only get a 1-year license, you have to pay the full fee.
Okay, so that's
So
acceptable.
we'll take out
Then
the 10% for
and
the
then it
first
goes
year,
for
and
a
start from 20%.
20% for the second year. Okay, but I mean, I should point out that the dollar
I'm not gonna-
amounts for
I'm
these
not gonna
licenses
quibble.
tend to be low anyways.
I'm not going to quibble about it.
Well, they start low and then they seem to go up.
This has been
You know,
pretty much the
the
same.
thing is that I'm trying to incentivize people to get their animals licensed for a variety of reasons. But we're talking about a fee that's relatively low. So $14, saving $7 in the fee. We're arguing about whether we should give them a $1.40 discount or not. So I think we should just do 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 because it sounds better.
Hey, that's fine. Either way is okay with me.
But if it's a 1 year, they should not get the discount.
Okay, so it would be 0 the first year. It would simply, I'll simply remove the reference to the first year, and then for a 2-year license, it would be a 20% discount. 3-year license, 30% discount.
That's not what I said.
Okay, then I need to be clear.
I said 10, 20, 30, 40, 50.
Okay,
And so the first year,
That was my purpose
they get the
this year.
10% discount in the first year if they get a multiple of years. But if they just get 1 year, they have to pay the full price, $14.
No, that doesn't make sense.
That makes sense.
No,
That
it
makes sense.
doesn't.
It does.
Made sense design, that's
makes-
2/3 majority.
so 1 year, there's no discount for 1 year. Second year is a 20% discount.
Oh, you keep changing my words, Fred.
So if you take
What's the only
1
way
year
to
only,
end
1 year
up at
only, no
50
discount.
after 5
Correct.
years?
Multiple year, you'll get a 10% discount the first year, then 20.
I'm glad you don't
Then a multiple year.
charge an hourly rate.
And I'm
So we have
happy
to
I'm not an
explain this.
accountant.
I'm saying 10% the first year if they get the multiple years.
And
They
multiple,
don't get
then it's
multiple
not
years, they
10%
pay
the
100%.
first year.
and Richard, is it multiple 5 or 3 or 2?
And
How
so
many?
for a 2-year license, it would be,
20%
okay, let's,
discount.
since I'm not getting this, so for a 2-year license, that's $28 minus what percent? 10% or 20% from that?
You want to live it to 5 years for the
20%.
discount?
Let's look at this differently.
Okay,
If you charged, if they're going to get a license for 5 years, what's the total cost?
14 times.
And then
50,
cut it in,
70,
and then cut
that
it
would
in
be
half
$35.
and reduce it proportionally every year. The point is to reduce the cost. So if they're paying 14 times 5, what's that, $70, then we're charging them 35 for 5 years
For a 5-year.
instead of 70.
Right.
They have to buy the multiple years in order to get the discount. So it doesn't matter what the percentage is, they're going to buy a total package.
Right, except that the ordinance needs to have some direct guidance as to what those numbers are going to be or what the percentage is going to be. So-
And to get to 50% in 5 years, and to move up.
How about
each
if
year.
you just say, if you buy a 5-year license, you get a 50% discount?
Okay.
And skip
It
the,
begs the question about, yes, the 2, 3, and 4-year licenses.
It does.
Right, because you'll have the option to come in and buy,
Okay, you know what, let's do it your way. Let's do it your way.
you'll have the option to come in and buy a consumer,
You know, let's just do it his way, the 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%.
makes sense. So,
That's fine. Eliminate the first year.
There's no 10%. It starts at 20 after.
They're just going to have to pay that $1.40.
And this
30,
way you
30 year.
get to 50% by the 5th year.
exactly, makes sense.
Don't explain, just do it.
Okay, perfect.
20%, 30%, 40%.
You're talking about $14 a year. If you own a horse, it costs a whole lot more than $14 a year to care for a horse.
Well, but the point, okay,
I mean, this
the
incentive,
reason the licensing is so important, it has nothing to do with the licensing at all. It has to do with protecting the land use. If you do not register your horse in a year, you lose the protection of the land use, and you could be encroached upon by a neighbor who puts a granny flat within 50 feet of your corral. So just because somebody doesn't have a horse for a year, I don't think they should lose their designation. One way to protect that is to allow them to buy a 5-year license, and then they would have the designation for 5 years. That's why I'm doing this. I introduced a separate motion to change the rule about losing your land use for not registering your animal, because I don't think one has to do with the other. So we'll consider that on a separate occasion, but I think this will allow an owner to protect their property for 5 years. It's not the cost.
so it's not about the money.
It's not so much the money. This is just a little incentive to get them to license their animal, but the real protection,
perfect sense.
the real protection is to preserve the land use.
So, Mr. Zine, do you have any questions?
Well, I
or
have
comments on
one.
it?
I didn't think about this until reading through. Any person owning or having custody, Los Angeles Police Department has a mounted unit. They have a number of horses. Do we want to put an exemption for law enforcement or Rex and Parks? They may have a mounted unit, an exemption for, because we have to get our cars licensed, motorcycles licensed. Should we put an exemption in here for city-owned horses to avoid somebody coming up to say, okay, who's going to pay for this?
Probably the police attorney will have a better idea of this, but I think that I'm not sure that the department actually owns the horses, as opposed to we have a mounted unit, but the individuals actually own their horses.
No, the mounted unit owns the horses.
The department itself owns the horses?
The horses are purchased and they're maintained by the department, and all the equipment, the trailers, and the officers are full. It used to be a volunteer, where you'd bring your own horse, but now it's become a full-time out of Metro. I was just at their steak fry last Friday night, and they have fundraising to try and support some of the other functions, but the concern is, who's going to pay the $14 when someone says, you own a horse? The city of Los Angeles, I think Rex and Parks has some horses also.
I would suggest that we include an exemption for any city-owned animals, provided we found that confirm that there are such.
Other than Rex and Parks and Police, I don't know of any other.
Certainly, we'd sort of be chasing our own tails if we're running around trying to license all these animals.
I guess it begs the question, since the 1-year license has been on the books for a long time, whether we have in fact registered the horses that we've owned for many years, and whether we've complied with this, or whether...
I think that item
Probably
is
not.
out of order.
That's a what?
That is not on the agenda.
It's part of the agenda.
Thank you, Councilman.
No, here, I can see someone making an issue, and I'm trying to avoid that issue.
Well, let's just
Put an
accept them as
exemption,
part of it.
exemption for city-owned horses.
I dare somebody to make an issue of us
They would.
licensing our police horses. I don't think it's a problem.
We license our vehicles, our motorcycles. We license all the city equipment. Everything's got a license.
Yeah, but that's because of the state involvement. I don't think we have to license our own horses.
I don't think so.
Well, I don't think we
I
should.
think none of
we should have
us
an
think
exemption
so.
to avoid a conflict.
And
Okay, so we all
I'm
agree
happy
on
to
that.
I'm happy to accept that as an amendment.
Friendly amendment.
I do want to point out that all the money goes to improve horse trails.
Oh, it's a great idea.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we want to get more horses registered and to give the multi-discount is to get an infusion of a larger amount of money into the horse trail reparation fund, and then we can make our horse trails better.
And I read there's 90,000 horses and only a handful are licensed.
Last time I counted,
I did too. I found there were only 89,970.
well, but honestly,
Oh, I'm sorry.
honestly,
1649 registered and 90,000.
yeah, honestly, that figure probably includes literally thousands of horses that don't reside in Los Angeles but are stabled in Los Angeles.
Right.
So the owner may be in Burbank, and yet their horse is stabled in Los Angeles. So it's a little, and I don't even know where we got the 90,000 figure from. I think it was an estimate from Animal Regs, but we really don't
Oh, I
know.
thought you did personally count. I'm disappointed.
I think it might have been a neighborhood council.
You know what, you could find out by sanitation with the brown bin, because the horse folks have brown
It
bin.
was the what?
We did,
Oh, it was the Equine Advisory Committee.
Yeah, and we did get a list of licenses a list of the brown bins after we started talking about this, and we sent out letters to all of the people who have brown bins.
What numbers did you come up with on the brown bin?
Oh, I have to go back and look, but we'll
they
include that.
thousands?
Let me just put it this way, there's a way to calculate, but it involves manure.
I'm just curious at this stage.
We counted 432 brown bins.
Okay. So it's somewhere
Hey.
between 9,000.
Hey, also, we have one,
Horse manure.
I will insert among all this horse manure a speaker from the public. We have one speaker, Phyllis Doherty.
You may want to pass on this one.
No, I'm going to jump in.
Hopefully not literally.
No. Phyllis Doherty, I want to give you a different way to think of this. The horse licensing is not like other licensing. It's not like dog licensing. They don't spread rabies. All the money most of the money from dog licensing, it's a fee, has to go into a rabies account, which I'm not sure we're actually maintaining, but that's state law. So you license dogs because they're dangerous. You permit exotic pets because they're venomous or whatever. Horses are not a safety hazard. The only reason that we license them, the only reason, is to create a collective fund to improve our trails. We're defeating that. This deliberately defeats that. $14 a year is not too much. It's a very small amount. Believe me, it doesn't even cover the damage that one horse does to a trail, and we know that. But this is a way to try to get the maximum money, and with the city going broke, who is going to improve these trails if we don't have these horse owners contribute this entire $14 a year? It's nothing. If you gave them a 10% discount over a period of time, that's fine, except that we hope that the licensing will go up a little bit to start covering the costs. 10% if it like you do for a dog license for 3 years, 10% discount. That's nice. That takes care of the added cost, the annual cost, but that's all going to be done online, so people aren't coming into counters anymore. That's going to be a thing of the past. So we're actually depleting the only way we have to make these horses safe out on those trails and make sure that people aren't getting injured and horses aren't getting injured, which is to require their owners to contribute $14 a year. That is absolutely nothing. So I would urge you to do a 10%. That's a nice little chunk. Yeah, mail it in and get your 10% discount if you want to do that. But don't deplete this fund down to the point where it's useless, and don't just become Big Brother. The only other reason to license horses is to say, we want to know what you've got. And people don't respond very well to that.
Thank you.
I have to completely disagree with my good friend Phyllis. 1,600 horses times $14 is generating how much? Can somebody calculate that? I don't know what that is. How much is that?
Last year, we had 1,500 licenses. We got about $21,000.
Okay, so 21,000. I donated 100,000 to improve horse trails in LA. That's 5 times more than we've generated by licensing. So in terms of infusing cash, I think I've covered the next 5 years of money that we're getting on the current path that we are taking. So any additional infusion of cash is beneficial. The thing is to acculturate the equestrian community to license their animals. And I believe a 5-year registration, part of the problem is you can't get these cowboys to come into City Hall 5 times and once a year. They just don't do it. And many of them will say, I'm not going to traipse on down to City Hall and pay for 1 year, every year. They'll forget, so they just don't get it done. Whereas if they can get one license, I think the numbers are going to go up far beyond 1,600, and they will double. And in 3 years, we may have triple the number of horses registered. You said there was an increase in the number of registrations of horses, and that's because we introduced these motions and put the word out in the Sunland, Tahunga, Shadow Hills, and Silmar communities and Lakeview Terrace that we were doing so, and many people are coming to register their animals where it wasn't happened before. So this is as much a marketing effort, just like $20.12 on adopting an animal encourages people to adopt animals. This is an encouragement to get people to register their animals where they wouldn't. They wouldn't do it for 1 year. They're not going to do it for 5. But this, because of the total discount and the 5-year protection, and yes, maybe I'm spinning a little marketing here when I say that this protects their land use, because there is a lot of encroachment. And when the house that I grew up in had a barn in the house behind it, but that is no longer permitted in that area because of the encroachment. When I used to have horses behind my house, not in my house, but behind my house. That didn't come out right.
No, it didn't.
But in the neighbor behind us house or barn, we can't have that ever again. And I think that same diminution of the equestrian culture in our community is occurring in Shadow Hills, in Sunland, Tahunga, in Lakeview Terrace, and in Silmar, in Chatsworth, and even parts of Burbank that are city.
Reseda.
And Reseda?
Reseda Ranch, got horses.
Even in Reseda. For God's sake, let's save the horses in Reseda.
Well, having fully exhausted both puns and the subject, I will move the item without objection that we return this to the city attorney's office, ask them to come back with their justification for a fee notice, as opposed to possible removal of that and possibly ordinances with both approaches back to us, along with removal of the 10% 1-year discount. How quickly do you think you can get that back to us?
Before the election?
I cannot promise you that. Part of it is that it goes through a review process in the office. And so
Why don't we just
the
erase
item
it here?
of removing the 10% for 1 year, that's not, that's very easy.
Can we
That
correct it
can
on
turn
its way to
around
city
quickly.
council?
It's the fee, it's that fee decision that perhaps will take a few days, perhaps will take much longer than that. That's the part that I don't have control over.
We attempt to bring this back to the next PAW committee meeting. Thank you. So without objection, that will be what we will do.
Thank you.
Item number 4.
The Community Development Department is requesting a third and final year of civil service exemption for 47 grant-funded positions.
Good afternoon, Deetra Fernandez, Community Development Department. Our item is for 47 exemptions. It's for the third and final year under Charter Section 100D4.
As I understand the situation, there's currently a question as to whether the program is being marketed effectively enough? What's your current marketing strategy for it?
These exemptions are part of our ongoing work activities. I don't know what program. These are for our WIA, which is our Workforce Investment Act, our annual plan. So there's numerous programs for our Family Source Centers, for our YAM activity centers. These are 47 continuing positions for continued programs.
Is the reserve officer program part of this?
No.
It's not, okay. All right, any other questions?
Is OPS Office of Public Safety? What's OPS?
OPS is Office of Public Safety. Just want to make sure that this is for Community Development Department, right, that you guys are looking at the exemptions for?
CDD.
Yes.
I understand Office of Public Safety, the Office of Public Safety I'm familiar with runs security operations.
Yes, for the city of LA. We have some supplemental programs, so I don't know if that's what you're referring to, or the actual...
Well, there's a process of merging that, and it's in the final stage to be absorbed by the police department.
Right. These exemptions will be unrelated to that.
They will. But I thought Office of Public Safety is being eliminated with that umbrella with the LAPD.
Right. Again, these exemptions for community development are unrelated to Office of Public Safety or any consolidation effort.
But how...
What does the OPS stand for?
No, that's our operations.
All right, it's
Yeah,
not okay. OPS, the term I understand is public safety. This has nothing to do with that.
No.
Why are we doing this?
And
Yeah, these are 40, community development has 286 authorities, of which 80 are exempt authorities. So this is 47 of our exemptions. And because they are exempt from civil service status, that we have to go and to get city council approval. So we have exempted these 47 positions for 2 years. Under the charter section, you can get 1 year with 2-year extensions. So this is a request for a third and final year for these 47 positions.
And what happens to them next year?
Probably back again to re-exempt it. We have some continuous funding sources and some continuous programs.
So the funding you have outside the general fund?
Yes.
Any other questions? If not, I'd approve the exemptions without objection. Hearing none, that is approved, and we are adjourned.